Hello and welcome to our webinar, Layers of Security. This is the second installment of our MDR quarterly update series in partnership with Sophos. My name is Adam Myers and I'm the Sales Director here at Cyberlab. And what a session we have installed for you. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking around the SecureWorks acquisition. So anybody on the call, I think that's going to be fantastic to get early insight from our guest. We'll be talking integrations, and also MDR for Microsoft, which I think is going to be really good if for those customers that have made the move maybe to Defender, how Sophos can help with that solution. We're walking through some MDR example threat cases, which I find personally really insightful, things around man-in-the-middle attacks and how we can sort of prevent that and what Sophos are seeing. And equally, manage risk. A lot of customers we're working with have made that transition and starting to layer in managed risk as part of their budget and strategy. So it'd be good to see how that's helping add value to the Sophos portfolio. Hot topic is around AI. So we have our guest on who is really well placed to sort of talk through the products and services. I know that Sophos have probably been working utilizing AI for sort of 7 or 8 years, but it's going to be really good just to see where the roadmap is heading and their AI strategy. XOps and Sophos Labs, for me, is always something that's really interesting. So it'd be good to get a steer of what they're seeing and the telemetry they're pulling at the moment. And I do want to make this session interactive. So there will be a Q&A at the end, like last time, where you can field questions. But in summary, if you do have any questions during the talk track, please fire away, because it'd be great just to pose those to our guest. Okay. So it gives me the great pleasure of introducing Stephen McKay, who is a Senior Director of Product Management at Sophos. So Stephen, can you just maybe tell us a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis at Sophos?
Yep, thanks Adam. Thank you all for joining today. So as Adam says, I work within product management, I work within our security operations team, and ultimately I'm responsible for our endpoint products and our XDR platform. So work very closely with our managed services team, ensuring that they have the tools, data, and insight needed to, as you see here on the slide, detect, protect, and support you when it comes to Sophos MDR.
Amazing. So the first topic we've got on the agenda is around the SecureWorks acquisition. So for those that have joined the call, it was only, I think, announced earlier the week. So it's going to be quite an early insight into what that looks like. I know that SecureWorks are big in sort of SIEM and SOAR capability, and I think leveraging that and working with Sophos MDR, I think that's got real potential for the strategy moving forward that people will be looking to sort of onboard as part of their cybersecurity strategy. So Stephen, what early access or insight can you give us around what that acquisition might entail for our customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure everyone on the call has some awareness, but back in October, we announced the intent to acquire SecureWorks, and we were pleased to announce on the 3rd of February that acquisition had completed. So as you can well imagine, it has been 9 days, not all of those were working days. The teams are busy now looking at integration plans, as you allude to, Adam. SecureWorks has incredibly deep expertise in MDR. So it has its market-leading Taegis XDR platform. It has services around identity detection response, next-gen SIM capabilities, vulnerability detection response, OT security. I can go on. The message today for people on the call is stay tuned. As we continue our day-to-day operations, and that is really looking at how we can offer the best managed services with the data that we have available to you as customers. I'm sure in the not too distant future, myself and colleagues will be back in front of this audience to talk about exactly what the roadmap means. The key thing for everyone is this just further strengthens Sophos's ability to offer managed services that reduce the mean time to investigate, detect, and respond to the latest and greatest cybersecurity threats.
Yeah. I think for me, it really shows where the investment in the technology is heading, isn't it? We've seen a lot of that with MDR as a sort of big shift that's taken place. I think with that acquisition, it shows the intent and definitely where the market's heading. I think, the number of customers, 24,000, it changed every time I hear the number. It's definitely showing that intent and where maybe the shift is moving with an acquisition of this kind. So yeah, really good. Looking forward to it. So
Indeed.
Just in terms of, first topic I think we've got is around sort of integrations and MDR for Microsoft. So again, how customers maybe that have maybe made the shift to Defender, for example, or they might be looking at bolting on some integration packs. What does that look like, I guess, for them, and what you're looking at as a sort of long-term roadmap?
Yeah, indeed. It'd be remiss of me not to highlight, as you say, it changes all the time. Sophos MDR was 27,000 customers.
Yeah.
With the acquisition of SecureWorks, that pushes it into the 30,000 plus, and just really underscores the investment, as you allude to, Adam, that we've made. Now, the other thing to touch on is around what we call the open ecosystem. So the slide in front of you, this is very much kind of as of today. Yes, we've acquired SecureWorks. This will change, and I'll go into that in a moment. As of today, when you buy, be it XDR or MDR, there are a number of integrations available to you as a customer. So on the left-hand side, you see the products and offerings that Sophos has that are included in your core license. So if you have the Sophos endpoint or Sophos mobile, that security telemetry will be ingested by the service to offer you better security outcomes. On the right-hand side, you see that we have 8 now additional categories of integrations that are available. There are 2 key things to point out. The first is you will see that the endpoint category is included in the base license. As much as we talk about XDR, extended detection response, everyone has an endpoint. And endpoint data is so important to the day-to-day cybersecurity service that we offer that if you do not use Sophos on the endpoint, but you are interested in the Sophos managed services, it's so important that we do ingest that telemetry, be it from Microsoft, CrowdStrike. You can see the logos here. The other included categories, we typically say productivity, but you'll find Google and Microsoft over in email and Microsoft in identity. Again, if you've invested in Microsoft and you've got M365, that data is so important to the managed service that it's included in the base license. So to summarize, this is all about, from a Sophos perspective, meeting you as a customer where you are with your cybersecurity investments. So I'm going to pick on Rubrik in backup and recovery. So backup and recovery is a fairly new category we've added, and I'll touch on why in a moment. That category, so we're looking at not just the breadth of categories that we have available, but also the depth of logos therein. If in October last year, as a customer, you invested in Rubrik for your backup and recovery services, we want to ensure that you don't need to go and make a different investment in order to get that telemetry security insights into the Sophos MDR platform. So if you're sat there looking and thinking, well, that's fine, but I have a different backup and recovery vendor or a different firewall vendor, this is a conversation with Sophos to have to look at how we can ingest that telemetry from the additional party. And SecureWorks have a plethora of integrations that is only going to further the breadth and depth that you see here in front of you.
Yeah, amazing. Because what I see there, like you said, there's investment already made and budgets have been set. Over the last 3 years, products are always hot and somebody's saying you should be buying this and whatnot. And that, we're all guilty of maybe sort of getting swept into that sort of product type led conversation. I guess I'm seeing cybersecurity now, especially what you guys are doing is almost like gluing everything together. You're kind of, instead of it being sort of disparate and systems don't talk to one another, you're doing what I think now is the opposite, and you're trying to knit everything back together. And I think that's brilliant that the industry's moving that way. I think even just from some of the events that we host, we see that you're wanting to collaborate with some of our other vendors, and I think that as a customer, you get a much better experience and a more layered cybersecurity approach and strategy, I guess. So I think it's great that you're doing that, and just more of these names on these integration packs is going to be better for everyone, I think. So good to see.
Yeah, agreed. And not everyone is, to be candid, but the open ecosystem Sophos has had for, over 2 years now, and it's reaping benefits. Microsoft is a great example. We know how many people are invested in Microsoft. We know candidly some of the telemetry, they're just audit logs, and in isolation, you need a seasoned team of professionals to go and dig into that detail to understand what truly is going on. Ingesting that telemetry into our platform and using our managed service gives you better security outcomes. So yeah, good to hear and fully agreed. And then, this is very much what we call a architecture slide. It just really visualizes, this is not from a Sophos perspective. And again, a little bit of shade thrown on maybe some competitors. This is not an alert aggregated system. I'll stick with the Microsoft example. There is a management API, and that's available across all the Microsoft licenses. So anyone on the call that has a degree in Microsoft licensing and can tell me the difference between Entra 2 and Entra 1, etc., great. To keep it simple, every Microsoft license includes the management API. When we collect that data from the management API, they're otherwise referred to as the audit logs. They are just simple things. Adam's logged in. Adam's changed his password. Adam's session token is. But by importing that data, not only do we collect it, but we add additional context around that audit event. And then we correlate them together. And that allows us to raise detections to the managed services team, the Sophos MDR ops team, that maybe indicates a business email compromise that without a team like Sophos, you would have to do in a SIM yourself, or candidly, it would just go unnoticed. And so this slide is really talking about the fact that across all of these different event sources, we're collecting that data, we're adding the relevant context, we're correlating them so that we can identify where there may be a detection that's worthy of an escalation to go and investigate. And across the bottom, you can see this is then further enriched with threat intelligence, where we have it automatic and automated response actions and further threat analytics. And on the right-hand side, you can see this can be self-managed using our XDR platform yourself, or used across the Sophos managed services. It's a 24/7 team, and they can become an extension of your security operations center. They can do it all for you, and every mode in between you can imagine.
Very good. I guess we've seen a bit of a shift. What we certainly are is the customers that have maybe bought XDR as well and not had maybe the resource internally to sort of keep on top of everything, and maybe making that move now to MDR. So that seems like a shift that we're definitely seeing for any of those XDR customers and sort of utilizing, I guess, the expertise at Sophos. So yeah, something we can always review, but definitely a bit of a shift there as well, with all these bolt-ons that are coming. So good to see.
And then I'll finally touch on the most popular non-Sophos packs, and it just reiterates what we just talked about. The Microsoft, the productivity packs, you can see the numbers here. The reason is very simple. A, the prevalence of Microsoft and Google within almost every organization we deal with. And B, the importance, business email compromise, even above ransomware, when we think about what is keeping C-suite and key decision makers awake at night, is this idea that you have a business email compromise that goes unnoticed. And by the time, dare I say it, legacy approaches have kicked in, it's too late. Someone's already sent money to the who was posing as a CFO, etc. And back to your point, Adam, we're seeing a shift as well within Sophos from people moving to XDR to MDR. Do you have the skills and expertise running 24/7 to truly investigate and respond to these escalations, or do you actually need that help of teams that are running this? And I touched on earlier, Sophos has 30,000 customers. We're seeing detections come from third party, be it backup and recovery, first party firewall, third party Microsoft integrations. The depth of expertise within that Sophos team means you're always getting an expert investigating your case. Not many customers can run a security operations team that has expertise across cloud, network, firewall, you name it, and be available 24/7, 365.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to, again, just the ROI model of that, doesn't it? Where, to build out and, salaries and whatnot and budgeting for that and training and resource, to sort of upskill people to utilize XDR. It comes a point where, certain businesses, it definitely suits, and we see that. And there's certain, cases to have XDR as as what they would prefer. But MDR in most instances we see now as a way of working with your team, and instead of sort of having to bring on sort of a whole managed SOC and sort of look after that, it can become quite difficult to do that. So we're definitely seeing customers definitely take that move and whatnot. But yeah. Okay, so we actually have some examples now of some MDR threat cases. I think this is really insightful. I find it quite fascinating, just personally working in the industry, quite passionate about it. But there's a few things around man-in-the-middle attacks and whatnot. So I guess, yeah, I think we've got 2 or 3 examples that you're going to share with us, Stephen. So yeah, a little bit for us all to understand what's happening.
Yeah, and the first thing I would say is we're collecting more and more of these examples because it's understandable. People are saying, okay, what does Sophos MDR really mean?
Mhm.
I think we've got two examples today. We can send out more, and one of the call to actions is do engage with the team at CyberLab and do ask. You know, we will make available these cases on an ongoing basis. So do ask the question. If there's an integration you're looking at and you want to say, well, what's the value in that to me? We will have a case that outlines it. So this one really underscores the value in integrating your Microsoft telemetry. So I'm sure everyone on the call will be pleased to hear. We won't go through in huge detail, but in essence, first slide here is around the activity. So between just before 11 a.m. and 12:30 UTC, there's a phishing email gets sent out. Quite a standard, attack in that sense, sending out a phishing email to see what traction they get. Unfortunately, a user does click on that and they do enter their credentials into a fake page. And this is a threat that we see all too often. If you're aware of our state of ransomware reports, aware of our active adversary reports, credential theft is number one. Because once I have those credentials, it allows me to get authorization into the system and then expand my footprint. Um, Interestingly, here you'll see the kind of fourth point, the attacker does also steal the session tokens. And that's another thing that's so important, the ability to have that session token that means things like two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication is circumvented by the fact that for the state of the session, I have a token that says, no, I truly am Adam. You don't need to worry about me. Now I've got the session token and the credentials, I'm able to log on to a portal and actually change a link within a calendar invitation. So this is really now how I'm going to um, infect the organization, look to land and expand. You can see around the same time, this is where a proprietary rule. So I'm going to be really blunt now. This isn't as ingesting a Microsoft detection. This isn't as seeing a third-party detection and just elevating it. This is Sophos detection engineers who are taking raw audit telemetry and being able to launch a proprietary rule. And this identifies to the ops team that there is a potential at this point, what we call adversary in the middle attack. Now that detection, the way it's been written, etc., triggers a case to be created. So as you can see, the timestamps, this is all within candidly seconds. So we're now at 12:30, so 90 seconds after the detection. An analyst picks up that case and looks at the sign-in logs for that user. Now they are UK based. We can see that from their logons and the audit information going back weeks. We can see their regular logon from the UK. However, they've recently had some logons that we are able to geolocate to other locations. So as part of the investigation, we also see that as part of the audit logs that come in, the fact that they've edited this calendar invitation and changed the link. And then case closed. So just before 3 o'clock, we actually then work with the organization. So block that sending email account, the one that originated the phishing attack. Reset the user's compromised credentials. I think it does say somewhere in here, we also revoke the session tokens. That's another thing you can do with an entry. You can actually revoke that session token. That means even if the attacker still had the credentials, they'd need that multi-factor to fully authenticate. We went through, and you can see here, depending how familiar you are with this, there is within Microsoft 365 these what they call conditional access policies. And this means that you can say this user should be logging in from the UK, and this would have been a further barrier to the adversary that this wasn't configured. Now this is best practice recommendation that we're giving to the organization. Yeah. And then, of course, we go and confirm that no one else was targeted in the attack, no one else clicked on that phishing link. So, to repeat, a great example of ingesting telemetry from a third party in which the Sophos expertise was leveraged, the Sophos custom detections that we've written based on the raw audit logs that come in, and then not only remediation guidance in order to how to stop the initial threat, validation that no one else is exposed, and then a recommendation to further enhance security going forward.
Yeah. And just to jump in there, we actually do CyberLab I host it a live hack. So what we do there, it's around sort of 3 examples of how our pen testers, for example, can get around things like MFA using reverse proxy phishing, for example. Or we might use things like QR codes just to kind of the social engineering. We see it in car parks more and more often now, where sort of someone stuck a QR code over the top. But in essence, it's capturing that credentials and sort of harvesting them and going from there. So again, seeing how Sophos can be the solution to that for me is really beneficial. But if anybody would be interested in see those live hacks, we do them in person, but equally we do specific webinars purely just in the live hack and walk through the sort of techniques that are used, and most people find those quite insightful. So yeah, another sort of session that we might be able to run on the back of that first example.
Yeah, indeed. It's that classic case, Adam, of until you've seen it happen, hopefully
Yeah,
not to yourself, it
yeah,
feels like something that happens to other people.
yeah, it does.
Um, when you've seen an email that looks genuine, you've clicked on a link, and of course, everyone's seen that Microsoft logon page.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah,
because everyone's seen it, it's very easy to spoof, and you
yeah,
just unwittingly pop in credentials. So I think it's great you do those live hacking sessions, because seeing candidly how easy it is drives home that we can all fall victim of this, and it's hard to be vigilant all the time. And why, again, reiterating the point, having that managed service to lean on that's looking after you 24/7, 365 is key.
yeah.
This one we could have spent the whole hour on, and I'm not going to do it justice, so I apologize to you all. Read the title slide. It is as it reads: fake IT employee that's been sent from well, let's call it North Korea for what it is, that is residing within an organization. So, 9 p.m. UTC. The background to this, just to kind of set the context, is IT workers are routinely sent by different ATPs to go and live in certain locations and get jobs in Western organizations. And as you see here, it says particularly the US tech sector, but we're seeing them, everywhere in Western Europe and North America. And what do? Well, often they do their job for as long as it takes for them to get what they need. So the important part of this. So just before the end of 24, the key words here are proactive threat hunt.
Yeah.
At this stage, there is nothing suspicious or malicious that has been detected that's made the MDR operations team go and investigate. This is a proactive threat hunt because, again, coming back to what we've said several times, the MDR team is a group, and when we talk about XOps, it's a very large group of seasoned threat hunters, detection engineers, threat researchers. And the team kick off a proactive threat hunt that look for this known group that are embedding fake IT workers within customers' environments.
Mm.
Within a couple of hours, we found a user within an organization, and they're logging in. And the reason they stand out is they're using a VPN that isn't used by anyone else. That's the thread that we pull on. Everyone else is logging in various ways, but someone stands out as being different. The other thing that happens, and this will tie it back to the previous example, this organization does have conditional access policies set up. And what we believe happened is they were using a VPN in order to appear to be geolocated elsewhere in the globe. And unfortunately for them, they forgot to use that VPN on one occasion. That meant they triggered a conditional access policy that said they were located in Russia. They've been working, as you can see here, for around 6 months. So a huge amount of time that they'd been posing as a worker, going about their day-to-day job, logging in from a geo IP location that didn't trigger conditional access rules. But the outlier was they used VPN software that no one else in the organization used. We then were able to go and analyze this user's activity, look at emails, and we could see they had gained very high privilege access within the AWS environment of the organization. So if you think about what we call dwell time, this bad actor was not about running ransomware as soon as they had access to the system. This was about slowly getting more and more access within the organization that would eventually have allowed them to trigger their action on objectives. And we don't know what that action would have been. We can speculate. But the reason we don't know is we immediately alert the customer. For those of you that have forgotten, this is getting on towards 11 p.m. on the 30th of December. So I'm sure whether it's mulled wine or mince pies, the IT team had other things on their mind at this time of night. Just before midnight, the customer responds and we kick off a live conference call. So again, come back to this. Sophos MDR is an extension to your team. This is not a case of we send you an email and then go on to the next thing. We jump on a call, we work with you. And we stay with that call until we can confirm that that account has been disabled. So to recap, fake IT worker, months within the organization, slowly gathering more and more access to the extent that they reach highly privileged AWS account access. Think of your own environments, whether it's AWS or Azure or a data center, that's going to be critical infrastructure. They now have access. There's brand reputation damage, etc. And because of the Sophos MDR proactive threat hunt and the fact that we're an extension to your team, within hours, literally hours of discovering this activity, that account's been disabled. We continue to monitor to make sure, other guidance that's not in these slides around restricting the use of that VPN software that the bad actor was using, etc., all come back to ensure that the attack surface is restricted, the adversary is removed from the organization, and just ensures your security.
Yeah. The insider threat risk, though, must be if you were, I don't know, head of IT or something like that, must be a difficult one to manage, especially, isn't it? Because, you're onboarding people, we all do it as, as the business grows, for example, it's difficult, isn't it, to spot those sort of behaviors, especially over such a long period of time. And I think we're always, wanting to sort of help employees kind of like work well. It's just difficult, isn't it? And I don't always think it's the really large businesses that need to worry about this. It's a risk for everyone, isn't it, Stephen? I think in terms of that insider risk. So
Yeah, going back to your live hack demos, the other thing I often talk to customers and partners about is everyone thinks that these nation state attacks are targeting the FTSE 100, the global 500s, etc. They are not. If they can get into a 50-seat organization and use that for data exfiltration for ransomware in order to basically meet their action on objective, which is most of the time to get money, they will do so. And unfortunately, I've spoken to too many customers who assumed that they were not of interest to the adversaries. Unfortunately, if they are able to get into your organization, you become of interest, whatever size you are.
yeah. I think we see that with some of the podcasts we've done with Peter McKenzie, for example, and sort of some of the stuff he shares in terms of that podcast. So if just to sort of segue onto that, I think watching some of that podcast that's literally just been launched, I think you'll find a lot of real live examples that Stephen mentions here. So just moving on to manage risk. So we're seeing a big uptake within customers of Sophos and new customers take on the managed risk solution. So I guess, Stephen, just expanding a little bit on where that technology is heading and what it kind of does so that our customers can understand if that's sort of something they're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'll read the stat. The most important part of this slide is right at the bottom there. If you have not already, if you have any interest in cybersecurity, go out, download and read the Sophos State of Ransomware reports, the Active Adversary reports, because I will reiterate, it doesn't happen to me, or it only happens to other organizations / bigger organizations, is not the correct mindset. And you will see we have these reports by different verticals, etc. Managed risk focuses on the fact that, as you can see here, nearly a third of ransomware attacks start with an exploited unpatched vulnerability. Now, let's rewind. Adam and I have talked about managed risk. What is managed risk? We have an attack surface. Every organization does. managed risk is about helping you as a customer understand your external and internal attack surface and managing that. So I'll give a brief example. When you take managed risk, there is an onboarding session, because with managed risk, we have to do a baseline. We have to understand this is what we've identified is what you own. This is the risk profile of what you own. How can we now work to mitigate the risks across your attack surface? And one of the very first onboarding sessions we had was very eye-opening, because the team kicked off, they'd done the external scan to look at all the external facing assets an organization had. Those of you who have been around for a while might recall when you set up an Exchange server, there was a service that would run that would allow employees to log on to webmail. So you could get your emails from any web browser via the webmail. And we identified that this webmail service from IIS was open within this organization. And the individual on the phone to the Sophos Managed Risk team said, "Oh, that's interesting. Didn't realize we had this exposed." What became very telling was the person on the call from the organization was responsible for the email within the organization and had worked there for over 10 years. So for over 10 years, someone had set up Exchange on a physical server within this organization that was publishing externally IP addresses that were accessible to all and sundry. And the organization didn't know. So point one, you need to know what you own. You need to know what is exposed to the internet so you can mitigate the risk. Until you know that, you cannot understand what your attack surface truly looks like. Point two, it's ever changing. Someone goes and spins up a new service. Does it have externally facing IP addresses and protocols? Unless you continually monitor your attack surface, you can never be sure what has changed. So this is not a point in time, everything's locked down, we're safe. This is about an ongoing monitoring. Finally, anyone that has any experience of vulnerability assessment, vulnerability management, there are a lot. Sophos will have stood in front of you at some point, I'm sure, and talked about how many vulnerabilities were disclosed in 2024, and it's a very big number and it grows every year. Any service that says you have vulnerabilities is only doing a fraction of the job. We have to then prioritize what the risk is and what we patch first and why. I forget the exact stat, so I shall make it up. Feel free to look it up and email me the correct answer. It's something like the average time to patch a vulnerability in an organization is 182 days. Why? Because there are so many to patch and there is so much other work to do that it does take us a long time. So it's important, nay imperative, that we prioritize what we patch. And then building on the second point, identify those new risks fast. Today, I might tell you to go and patch your IIS server that has publicly facing ports open. By identifying new risks fast, that might move down to number 3 if I identify 2 exposures that are more critical. So, Sophos Managed Risk, like with everything else we've talked about, is taking the information about your attack surface, but doing so with a team of seasoned experts that will have, first of all, an onboarding session to baseline what your attack surface looks like. Second of all, work with you to make sure that we continually monitor the risk and exposure that you have. And 3, prioritize those vulnerabilities so that you are clear as to where you should focus your time and attention. And then finally, help you identify any new risks quickly.
Yeah. I think just touching on that, we have a large pen test division, sort of Crescent Check certified, and that's a snapshot in time, isn't it? You might do it after a major project change, you might do it once a year, but that, I guess, the monitoring between those tests, for example, and vulnerabilities that might arise, or like you touched upon, I think the example of, someone worked here 10 years ago and they've probably done something and jobs change. It's just common things that then leave you susceptible. Someone's left a port open. There's a lot there that we probably just don't get visibility of, isn't it? It's just difficult to do. So I think it's just helping with that, which is good to see. So yeah, amazing. The next slide, I think we're moving on to AI. So a bit of a hot topic, and I think we've got the right person on to talk about what Sophos are doing. I know that you looked sort of and utilised AI for the last 7 or 8 years, so it's not new to you, probably, Stephen. I think Sophos are probably guilty of not shouting enough about what they do and the technologies they use, and now more and more people are using AI as the sort of hot buzzword. But there is a real advancement in technology that we're seeing, and it'd be good to see what the roadmap and what you've got installed for our customers around AI. So yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll try and correct some of that today. I'll shout more about AI. And for those of you still with us, mark your bingo cards up. It took us, a good half an hour, Adam, to get to AI. So apologies for those of you that are expecting it sooner. Artificial intelligence, as Adam touched on, it's not new. The key thing at Sophos is we look at how we can deliver outcome-focused AI, and the key word on this slide is empowering security analysts. So how do we empower, whether it's within your organization, within the Sophos MDR team, within the XOps team, to address the threat landscape and neutralize adversaries in a more efficient manner? So it says here, 2017, we acquired Invincia, and that was where we looked at machine learning. And the goal there was about identifying zero-day threats, so malware. So historically, we'd have a piece of malware, we would write a signature. That signature, if it saw the malware, would block it. And the industry was moving in the kind of early 2017s to say, how do we prevent threats that change themselves in enough of a pattern that signatures alone are not sufficient? And the answer was artificial intelligence. So we trained our models on lots and lots of data, and we are now able to stay ahead of these threats as much as possible with artificial intelligence. And you can see on the right-hand side, as I touched on, one of the key goals is empowering security analysts. So that's where generative AI comes in. I'll touch on that more in a moment. In terms of speed and efficiency to neutralize adversaries, this is how we use AI models across lots of our products and services. So I already touched on the malware example. Within our MDR team, we use AI to triage cases so that when a human picks it up, they have as much context and information available as possible. And it makes us more efficient in an operations team to investigate your escalation and respond to that threat. And then finally, operate with confidence. So this seems fairly obvious, but the Sophos product portfolio, 600,000 customer accounts, many millions of endpoint devices, hundreds of thousands of firewalls. We already touched earlier, near 30,000 managed service customers. It's this proven ability that means that we can actually operate with confidence. This is not a case, and I think to your point, Adam, about Sophos not making enough noise, is we almost understand the potential risk by saying, oh, we use AI in everything we do. If you don't have enough training model, if you don't have enough experience and exposure, it's hard to operate with confidence. And so what we've been doing is building up that confidence. Here are some use cases broken into 3 areas. So first of all, attack surface, how we mitigate those threats up front. The middle is how we respond and stop to threats. And then at the end is how we detect, investigate, and respond. So we just talked about Sophos Managed Risk. There we use Tenable has an AI model that predicts the likelihood of a vulnerability being exploited. And that comes back to what I said of any vulnerability scanner you use is going to tell you that you've got lots and lots of vulnerabilities. I'm fairly confident of that fact. The USP is how you say, okay, great, I've got X hundred or maybe even 1,000 vulnerabilities, but which ones do I truly need to care about? And this is where Tenable has its AI to help the prioritization so that the Sophos Managed Risk team can further help you to say, these are the ones that you need to go and deal with. In the middle, the 0 day, I use some examples from the endpoint and firewall already, but in Sophos email, for example, Impersonation attempts. We talked about business email compromise and phishing. The ability to identify a potential threat because of the language used, etc., or the ability within Sophos Mobile to have an Android model that looks for potentially malicious package files, again, helps us be proactive and stop threats. These things make our services team more efficient because we're not spending time dealing with things that should be stopped up front. And then finally, when we think about the investigation and response part of a DR, whether it's a managed EDR, managed XDR, is how do we make our analysts more efficient and how do we empower them to do their job? So some of the things those analysts do will be repeatable tasks that generative AI can do for us and therefore empower the analyst to spend more time on what really matters. An example that you may have seen recently, I will move on to this slide actually, is just this week, Sophos has launched its AI assistant. And that means now an analyst, instead of having to go off and identify all of the entities that were part of an attack, you can just type, show me all the entities that were part of attack. Or an analyst typing up all of their case notes. When they've finished their investigation, you can just type, create a summary of my investigation in a report for my CISO. It will do that, and that makes me as an analyst more efficient. So how do we think of artificial intelligence and certainly Gen AI at Sophos? We break this into 3 phases, as you can see. Phase 1 is really around efficiencies. So when the Sophos MDR team is writing up a case, we write a case summary. The case summary basically outlines what threat we saw, what we investigated, and what were the impacted entities. That's inefficient. Generative AI can do that for us. We know all of the detections that make up a case. I can write a case summary. Similarly with command analysis, the adversary uses an obfuscated command. It's got lots of different lines. It's got different switches and parameters. With enough time and inclination, yeah, sure, we can understand what it's doing, but is that the best use of my time? No. I can click a button and it can say, this is trying to, dump LSAS credentials and it's malicious. That's all I care about as an analyst, make me more efficient. Phase 2, I just talked about with the AI assistant, is where it's interactive. Now I have a Gen AI assistant within my team that can go off and do some things for me. So I can say, go and tell me, did anyone else click on that phishing email? I don't have to go and do that. Whilst Gen AI is going off to look at all the data we have in the data lake, I can be going to isolate a device, revoke that session token. If you remember from the MDR case example, I can go and reset user credentials. I can be doing much more effective and impactful response capabilities whilst generative AI is going to, based on my interactive nature, go and identify things for me. And then finally, autonomous. And this is where we've got virtual SOC members. If you think about that North Korean example or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea example, going to do that proactive threat hunt on behalf of the team. So instead of the team having to do it, a case gets created. Our autonomous AI has identified that there may be a fake IT worker in this organization. And so we've listed them out here. This is all about how we use generative AI to accelerate security operations. And the key point I'll make for you all is, as we've touched on 3 times now, Sophos has nearly 30,000 MDR customers. Other organizations will have, I'm sure, smaller numbers, but they will all suffer with the same challenge of you cannot grow your managed services team in that fashion and grow in a linear scale with the number of operators you need to run it. Mm-hmm. Generative AI will allow and does allow Sophos to keep growing the number of MDR customers we have because we're making our operators more efficient and empowering them with the use of generative AI. The other thing to touch on is, and we'll get onto this with the XOps slide coming up, is the virtuous cycle. So The ability of using generative AI with a seasoned professional in the ops team means they will see when it's a little bit spurious and say, they will give feedback to say, this wasn't quite right. This data point was incorrect. And that further helps train the model to make it more effective, to make the teams more efficient.
Yeah, and I guess there is a little bit of fear around probably businesses introducing AI. I would sort of suggest just from an IT and security background, and conversations we've had. And I guess it's probably we're seeing it more as how it complements people. I don't think it's here to hopefully replace jobs. It's more making us quicker and slicker, like you talked about, so that when you've got a threat hunting case on, you can do that faster and sort of get to probably the remediation action or closing the case quicker, I guess. So we're seeing it how it can complement us in security is what I probably see right now, and that's kind
Complement,
of
sorry,
big
Chris, so
step.
complement's the perfect word.
Yeah, yeah,
For anyone out there thinking it will replace, I will use the example. If you do not have a base understanding of the subject matter you're working with, Gen AI is no good. Go in, open up, Open AI, and type in something you know nothing of. Do you have the confidence to trust the output? You shouldn't.
yeah. Good. That's nice summary there. That's good. XOps, I find this quite fascinating. Well, around Sophos Labs, there's lots of good sort of research and information that comes out of the team. So, yeah, I guess just expanding and give a bit of insight for our customers on the call as to what you guys are up to, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. So XOps and Adam just said, and I'll use this to just pause and say, if you've not already, stick your questions in because we're nearly at the point where we can answer any questions you have. So fairly recently, Sophos Labs morphed into Sophos XOps, and the reason being is this is more than just the old labs team as we knew it, the threat researchers, the data detection engineers. This is a virtuous cycle of different teams. So I'll briefly go around the wheel. Top right, we've got our MDR security operations team and analysts. So they are across those 30,000 customers discovering new indicators of compromise. They're proactively threat hunting in the wild. Go back to that North Korean example. When that team uncovered the activity, they are then working with the rest of the XOP teams to look at, can we make protection? Can we write detection rules that would have found this sooner and more proactively? Can we put this into our artificial intelligence models across our email, firewall, endpoint, etc.? The AI data scientists are looking at how we can further train ML models. We talked about automation around MDR products and services. And again, that's in conjunction with the team. They then feed into the threat communications team. So here's a plug. Again, I talked about the state of ransomware report and the active adversary report. If you do not already visit news.sophos.com, whether or not you continue to use Sophos or not, it's just a very interesting way to read the latest and greatest on cybersecurity threats and insight. The Pacific Rim report's on there. If you're not sure what I mean by that, go and look it up because it's so interesting to see, as I talked about earlier, what is often perceived to happen to everyone else. It's happening out there every day, and it could unfortunately be you next. Sophos Labs, so the thing we typically refer to, these are the researchers that are looking at analysis of files, behaviors, creating detection rules, etc., but do not exist alone. They need the input from the data science team. They need the feedback from the MDR team. And then finally, our own security team, they're looking at whether it's our Ross McKay as our CISO, right through to the products that we deploy within our own environment, are the Sophos products we use as an organization to provide that insight. So this is very much a virtuous cycle to ensure that if you as a customer are fortunate enough that you do not have a fake IT worker in your organization, that the way the virtuous cycle works is if that were to happen to you next week, we've now got proactive detections, protections, and insight to ensure that you are as secure as possible. And really, for me, that's what it means. As you can see here, huge team across the globe, across all of these areas that we've touched on. So, with that said, and with about 10 minutes to go, if we need it, are there any questions that anyone wants to ask?
pause for a moment and see what's going on. I think the one question I've got is around, I guess, as defense gets better, I guess the risk is that I guess the attackers get more sophisticated with AI, don't they? I guess, and that's sort of like that continuous battle. It's probably like 10 years ago, it was something else. Was we were building tools to defend more so and whatnot. I guess it's just where that could go. The risk there long term, isn't it? With how advanced the speed of hackers, I guess, improves at the same time. So it's about making sure you put in things like MDR in place to stop that from probably happening. I would say, Stephen, isn't it? The risks
Yeah,
also go up.
the threat landscape is becoming ever more mature. Adversaries are getting smarter. As I said, years ago, people talked about script kiddies, or you would have fire and forget campaigns in which someone would send out spam emails in the hope that someone would click a link, etc. Whereas now, whether it's ransomware as a service, the dark web and credential theft. So you've got the uh, um, initial access brokers is the term that was escaping me. There is a whole industry out there, from someone seeing credentials that they sell on the dark web, to people offering malware as a service tools, to ransomware as a service tools, and it is no longer it's still nation state, but it's no longer nation v nation. There are nation state attackers who are highly sophisticated that are more than happy, if you're exposed, to attack you, whether or not you're a 10-seat organization or a 1,000-seat organization. That is around the clock. If you follow my advice and go and look at the active adversary report, it will not surprise you all to see that on one of those pages we talk about dwell time and when the attackers launch their ransomware attacks. It is out of hours. The majority of cases, it is between 6 p.m. on a Friday evening and 6 a.m. on a Monday morning. Why? Because they know that's when people within the organization are not there to see that they are active and to defend against them.
Brilliant. Okay, wonderful. All right. So I think that's everything for us. So I'll kind of wrap things up, which is good to see. So you'll see on screen now a QR code. This is not a phishing simulation test. So you'll be pleased to know it is a genuine QR code, not like the ones that we sometimes see in car parks. And this will essentially give you and detect data breaches, find and fix unpatched vulnerabilities, I guess, before attackers exploit them. And scan external facing assets such as websites, APIs, and cloud services, and we'll continue to monitor the dark web for any breaches as well. So worth checking out. It's free for anyone for 30 days on the call that's managed to join us. But yeah, I think there's other mechanisms to kind of join us. We've got our secure tour, which we're looking at 4 locations at the moment, which should be around May, June time. We're looking at Belfast, around Glasgow or Edinburgh in the Scotland area. We'll be looking at Bury St Edmunds and then Manchester. So Sophos will be a big part of that. We'll be doing things like the live hack. And equally, if you enjoy some of our podcasts, there's some really great information that you'll be able to sort of lean on us to sort of see where the threat landscape is heading. So I think, Stephen, thank you very much. I've learned a lot today and I found it really beneficial talking to you, and I hope our guests have. But thank you very much, and everyone enjoy the rest of their day. Thank you.
Thank you all.